History is full of dramatic battles, brilliant generals, and world-changing decisions, but once in a while, history gets weird. Imagine Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who had conquered half of Europe, the terror of coalitions, the strategist who had crushed empires, running from a horde of fluffy, charging rabbits. No, it's not a fable. It's not satire. This actually happened. And it wasn't just a few rabbits, it was hundreds. The year was 1807. Napoleon had just signed the Treaty of Tilsit with Russia, effectively ending the War of the Fourth Coalition. Spirits were high. Victory was sweet. The Emperor of the French wanted to celebrate, not with parades or monuments, but with a rabbit hunt. He summoned his chief of staff, Alexandre Berthier, and gave the order: organize a grand hunt in Napoleon's honor. Nothing extravagant, just a relaxing day with close officers, muskets, and wild game. A nobleman's tradition. Simple. Harmless. Berthier took his job seriously, maybe too seriously. Instead of sourcing wild hares, as was customary, Berthier ordered several hundred tame rabbits from local farmers. These were not fierce creatures of the forest. They were domesticated bunnies, used to being fed, handled, and gently herded into cages. On the day of the event, the weather was ideal. Napoleon and his entourage arrived, dressed for sport and expecting a dignified challenge. The rabbits were brought in cages and quietly released into the field. Everything was going according to plan. Then things got strange. Rather than scampering away in fear, the rabbits turned and charged. At first it was funny. Officers laughed. Napoleon smirked. A few bunnies hopping toward you? Harmless, charming even. But then more came, dozens, then hundreds. The laughter stopped when the swarm grew aggressive. Rabbits clawed at boots, swarmed legs, climbed coats. They weren't attacking out of malice, they were hungry. These weren't wild animals fleeing a predator. These were domestic pets who thought it was feeding time. They had been raised by humans. When they saw people, they didn't run. They rushed in expecting lettuce, carrots, or grain. Except this time, the humans were heavily armed generals and a rather startled emperor. Napoleon tried to shoo them away with a riding crop. Others waved muskets. Still, the rabbits pressed forward, relentless in their fluffy, adorable assault. Chaos broke out. Dignified military men, veterans of Austerlitz and Jena, ran, tripped, and shouted in disbelief. Napoleon himself, the man who once marched across the Alps, reportedly turned and fled toward his carriage as rabbits surged around his feet. The coachman cracked the whip, and the imperial party retreated, defeated for the first and perhaps only time by a lagomorph uprising. So what exactly went wrong? The mistake was simple but critical. The rabbits weren't wild. They didn't know how to behave in the presence of predators. Instead of fearing the hunters, they saw them as friendly figures bearing snacks. Tame rabbits associate people with food, not danger. When several hundred of them are released and simultaneously realize lunch is late, well, they organize. It wasn't a planned ambush. It was accidental chaos, born from over-enthusiastic planning and a fundamental misunderstanding of bunny psychology. And yet, in that absurd moment, the unstoppable Napoleon was hilariously and symbolically overwhelmed. Berthier was mortified. Napoleon, for his part, was said to be amused once the shock wore off. But the tale spread quickly, and the legend of the bunny battle became one of the strangest footnotes in Napoleonic lore. In fact, this wasn't the only time Napoleon experienced weird and unexpected resistance. He had once been bitten by a fox in exile. He narrowly avoided assassination by poisoned snuff. And his attempts to impose the continental system, a ban on British goods, led to black markets, mass smuggling, and fierce resistance not from armies but from everyday merchants and farmers. These odd details remind us that history's greatest figures weren't untouchable. They weren't immune to embarrassment. They weren't above slapstick chaos. Historians have debated whether the event truly happened exactly as described. Some argue the number of rabbits has been exaggerated. Others suggest it was a practical joke that spiraled out of control. But accounts from Napoleon's own officers confirm that a rabbit incident did in fact occur, and that the emperor did not emerge from it gloriously. The absurdity of the incident even sparked rumors in the Paris salons. Was Berthier trying to play a joke on Napoleon? Had the rabbit farmers misunderstood the purpose and simply sent the wrong kind of rabbits? Was it a political metaphor gone wrong? Satirists had a field day. In the age of Enlightenment wit and court gossip, this was gold. But beyond the humor lies a more profound observation about the nature of power and perception. For all his military genius and authoritative presence, Napoleon's image was always precarious, propped up by symbols, pageantry, and tightly managed narratives. A story like this cracked that image, if only slightly, reminding the world that even the mighty could stumble. There's also a psychological element worth exploring. Napoleon was known for his temper, his towering ambition, and his strict attention to detail. Yet here he was, undone not by strategy or politics, but by an unpredictable event that no preparation could have prevented. It was absurd, but also deeply humanizing. How does a man who commands empires process something so outlandishly silly? According to letters and memoirs, he didn't rage. He laughed. That reaction, if true, may reveal more about Napoleon's character than many battlefield accounts. It shows adaptability, a sense of humor, and perhaps a deeper awareness that history is not always in our control. Over time, the tale of the rabbit attack became more than an anecdote. It was a myth, a symbol, a parable about pride and unpredictability. Writers began to use it as a device in essays about power, drawing comparisons to other moments when leaders were humbled by trivial things. One English satirist wrote that, "History sometimes prefers the absurd to the noble, for it better entertains the living." Even in modern France, the story occasionally resurfaces in schoolrooms and trivia nights. Some educators use it to illustrate the importance of logistics or the dangers of poor communication. And of course, it's become a favorite among history buffs who enjoy the stranger side of the past. It's a reminder that no matter how much power someone holds, no matter how carefully they script their legacy, the universe has a wild sense of humor. And sometimes, history remembers you not for the wars you won, but for the rabbits you couldn't outrun. In an era where Napoleon's every move was chronicled, calculated, and curated for maximum impact, this one unplanned moment escaped control. And perhaps that's why it endures. It stands apart from the carefully polished image of the emperor and gives us a rare, unscripted snapshot of reality. Ridiculous, yes, but oddly refreshing. Because when you strip away the marble busts, the gold-framed portraits, the battlefield maps, and regal proclamations, you're left with a man in boots, laughing and running from rabbits. And that, just maybe, is the most human Napoleon ever got.